right. Yusuf, please state your name.
I'm Yusuf Dambele with UBS. Thank you, Musa, for your presentation. I think that in this topic, I have been doing research in the same area. Some of the people you have read, I have read them. I did a research on Elizabeth Stanton, Katie Stanton, and the feminist movement in the US in the 19th century. And I did also wrote an article on God, number, and gender for an upcoming encyclopedia on the Hebrew language and Hebrew culture. Where I don't agree with you, and of course, is on it's not the translation that makes the Bible patriarchal. That's the first point that I would not agree. And there is also the distinction between grammatical gender and the sex gender. In French, there is a feminine and there is a masculine. They have nothing to do with sex. The table is la table, feminine. A tree is l'arbre, masculine. But they have nothing to do with gender. That's one problem. So there are gender languages and genderless languages. And most of our African languages are genderless. My own language is genderless. So when we are translating a book, and particularly the Bible, with its ideology, a theology, then if we want to maintain the Bible, then we have to translate the theology of the Bible, not the theology of another book. We may make a choice. We may say, okay, the Bible is patriarchal and doesn't set our interest, then we have to make another book similar to the Bible with a God that is feminine and values that serve our community. But this is not the Bible. If we are to follow the Judeo-Christian tradition, then we have to translate the Bible following what is in the Bible, not our own, our own culture. So I don't think that I am translating through the colonial text of French or English, but through Hebrew and Greek, which I have studied. And when I did my research, I went on the Hebrew and Greek and study, and I'm translating on this basis. And as a theologian, I am aware also that God is not male or female. God is a spirit, and he has no sexual determination. But since, nonetheless, in the Bible, God is presented with attributes, male attributes, and we have to maintain them if we want to maintain the Bible that is given to us once for all. Thank you.
Faithful to the Bible. My argument is that our cultures are themselves a canon that also needs to be respected. And that you can't say we are just being faithful to the Bible, we are just being faithful to the Bible. The thing is that we are changing our cultures. Recently I did 82, since Robert Moffat introduced the idea that Mudimu, or God is a man through the Bible. I ran a research to ask these young people to find out if they know that in our understanding in the Setswana culture, Mudimu was never a man. And none of them knew that. They was like, God is man. So we can't just say we are being faithful to the Bible because this faithfulness to the Bible is also faithfulness to patriarchy. What if, this is the point I am pushing, what if we were needed also to be faithful to our cultures? Because when we start saying we are being faithful to the Bible, already this is the thing that I'm problematizing. We are working with theories of translation that do not come as respecting the cultures of the other and what they have, which is why I've been trying to propose that we have to realize that even if we are oral cultures, our cultures are themselves a canon that also needs faithfulness. If you believe that the Bible has a right to change this culture, why is it that you can't believe that this culture has the right to change the Bible as well? And this is why I started with the thief story, and I dwelt on it longer than maybe I should, because here was a group that was insisting, okay, we want to hear more foreign stories, we want to hear more Hamlet, we don't mind hearing more Shakespeare, but Shakespeare is going to be crafted in our own worldview. So I am pushing the boundaries against the current of the practice, and I'm arguing that the practice has been both suppressing and patriarchal, and patriarchalizing our cultures.
I can't tell you how welcome this intervention is for me. It's one that humanizes me. It's one that dignifies all of us. I'd like to talk a little bit about a barbarism that was practiced in Africa and was justified by the Bible. It's not a black barbarism. It's a white barbarism called apartheid. And we know that there is Botswana, and there was also a fiction called Bophuthatswana. There was an Ndebele people, and there was a fiction called Kwandebele, right? And all of these divisions that were created by apartheid and all these oppressions that were created by apartheid were created with the Bible in hand, right? With the Dutch Reformed Church in South Africa making distinctions on who was more human and who was more justified to hold that Bible in their hand. I was very encouraged when you said that God had no sexuality as well as no gender. That, because at this moment, we're also living through a moment in which people are saying what is in the Bible is giving them a justification to hate and kill people of different sexual orientations, not just in Africa, but also in the United States and in other countries in the world. So I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on that idea of God having no sexuality in Southern Africa and how it relates to equal rights for LGBT people in that part of the world.
I think if we look at the divine space, the way it was constructed, there was very much a move away from identifying with one sexuality or another, or gender. When we look at the traditional spiritualities, some of the traditional priests, I'm thinking of a book written by the Steve de Gratius, edited by the Steve de Gratius on issues of God's foreigners in God's house, issues of gay people in the church. And one of the things when they looked at that in the traditional spirituality, when men were priests, they had to take a different sexuality. And I think there's been a lot of of research coming from the Sangomas in South Africa, and the spirituality that there is, in fact, in this divine space, tolerance and practice, of same-sex. There's research right now that has been produced, because when one was a Sangoma and you are female, and sometimes of the spirit that occupied you were the spirit that were male, and that woman being woman did not want a man and wanted a female. So we have a lot of research that is coming up. Of course, in any news, there's always only the worst news that get out more than anything else. Even amongst the community of the Anglican, I've been working with the HIV/AIDS groups for the past 10 years. When we launched the Anglican strategy for all Africa in Cape Town, every morning we had a gay priest come out in South Africa. Just about 5, 6, 7 years later, there's an explosion, about the ordination of a gay priest. And I'm thinking, well, it really is interesting what news gets more elaborated than the other. Even now, as we speak, we have an association called the INIRELA, which is International Association of Religious Leaders Living or Affected by HIV/AIDS. We have a lot of Anglican priests that are there who are gay and their partners. And this movement has been there before the explosion of the gay ordained minister. But it is just which news get more public attention than the other. So to come back to your question, if we look at the Sangomas, and what research is showing right now, what we actually have is that there is, actually, when I heard about this, because I had a grandmother who was a Sangoma, I said, I wish I had time to talk to my grandmother before she died and ask her about the issues of same-sex sexuality. But research is indicating that in the African spirituality, especially those who are priests, the Sangomas, there is acceptance and practice of same-sex.
Vanamala from Bangalore, India. I'm curious to know, apart from the Bible translation and conversion of people into Christians, are there other communities like Muslim communities and tribal communities in, let's say, Botswana, who continue to have female deities and God in the form of the female? And how does the Christian community, which has been patriarchalized, interact with? So what is the mainstream? The reason I'm asking you this question is, in my understanding, whether you are a Muslim, a Hindu, or a Christian, religion has always been patriarchal across the board. So what is the composition and the chemistry between different religious groups? Even if there is a matriarchal or matrilineal kind of culture, has it not offset the power of this patriarchalizing by Christianity? That's my question.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have Muslims in Botswana, although a very small percentage, and we have Hindu, a very small percentage. In my department, we have a scholar of Islam, one scholar of Islam, we have one scholar of Hinduism. In terms of the indigenous spiritualities, one of the things that we've been studying is the African indigenous church, because it was a church that tried to put together the African indigenous beliefs and the Bible, and tried very much not to give to work with the idea that what is most important is the Bible, but put them together. So in that church, we find that women, were leaders. Women would be like founders of the church, prophets, healers, because, they worked with the issue of the Spirit of God coming on them. I remember I did an interview on these women, and I was asking them, how come you're a church founder and you're a woman and the Bible seems to say this? And all she said to me is that when God spoke to me, God never opened the Bible. And that was really, fundamental, because she was actually hacking into the oral, canon. Namely, God can speak to me without speaking through the text. And because of that oral, text, they can afford to, kind of, overcome or overlook the patriarchy in the Bible. But when you ask, I wouldn't say the Botswana were they were not matriarchal, but for some reason the spiritual space was very much, guarded against any form of genderizing. Or excluding one gender or another. So when you ask the question of how much has that survived, you have to realize that we have had the Bible since 1840. And one of the things that happened is that the Bible went together with the school and the church. In fact, the school was introduced primarily to serving purposes of Christianizing. So just about everyone who went to school, there were days during the colonial times that you wouldn't even be admitted in school without a biblical or English name. Virtually, you had to have renamed all names, like myself, my name, for example, will be regarded as pagan. You would not be admitted in school. So there's been a very structural change, and sometimes that's why we have to seek it more about outside those people who have been less educated, because being educated was itself being put in a structure of, of the church, and even just the reason why the hospital was introduced was not so much about the health of the people, but to marginalize the local health systems and together, because the medicine would go together with the priests and all that. So yes, if I look at the African independent churches, this is where we see the impact of indigenous spirituality, because women there will be leaders, will be in all sorts of positions. If you compare that with the established churches, Methodist, Anglican, and all that, that's a different story altogether. And now with the Pentecostals making very big movements, what we find amongst the Pentecostal is that although there is a big emphasis on the spirit, and it may look like there is equality, amongst the worshippers, in fact, it is very, very patriarchal, because the leaders are generally men, and women are really taught very, very conservative, teaching of the Bible.
I have a question I'd like to ask. May I first? I'll come about this question 2 or 3 different ways. First, let me set that, at least in publications, I've demonstrated that my approach to Bible translation is through a paradigm of contextualization. Something that I think I've heard you say in your lecture this morning, maybe not using that word, but I'm asked questions, and I ask myself questions that I would like you to think about with us for a moment. When several years ago, when I was defending my dissertation, one of the people posing questions said, and when you are asked to translate from the Bible passages that do harm, what are you to do? It wasn't that the interpretation of those passages, this is what this person was saying, the interpretations do harm, but that the narrative or the passages themselves do harm. And he asked me what I was to do. This might be similar but probably over dramatic to the slogan that guns do not kill, people do. And my third, final way to get about this question is, it's clear that the Bible has many parts of it that are other. And are we doing justice to the other by suggesting that it really does relate to our experience? Or might we be doing a service to ourselves to bring into relief the otherness that might be considered harmful or might be considered something that does not relate to our current contexts?
Thank you very much. Contextualization. I think this is a wonderful word, and in my view, when it comes to Bible translation, we have not had the courage to contextualize. We may talk in terms as if we are, but we are not willing to go there at all. We have been for too long claiming that we are keeping the Bible as other. So that's what I would say. We have been for too long claiming that we are keeping the Bible as other. That is, we are trying to keep it to be as faithful as it is to the source, and to be faithful to its patriarchy, to be faithful. The truth is, when we analyze, what is happening, we are not keeping it as other. So we may as well just own up to the fact that we are not keeping it as other. We are using it to suppress the otherness of other cultures. This is my contention right now. We are using it to suppress the otherness of other cultures. Insofar as we have done it for 200 years, how would it be if we could begin working with a translation model that says, let this Bible be contextualized in the real sense? If I am translating for a culture that does not hold God as male, why can't I rejoice and say, finally? And I look at the Western feminists, they have struggled and say, what do we do with a male God who is used to oppress us? For us is the other side. What do we do with a male God who is brought to us? And we didn't have that male God. Our languages did not have a male. You will think that the Bible translators would rejoice when they get to that language, because the language gives them a solution. They don't have to deal with a problem. The language gives them a solution on how to speak with God, about God in a neutral way. But no, that's not what the Bible translators have done. And I wonder to how many churches I have gone. It is 95% women. Why have the translators insisted they keep this male God, even when the majority of the readers and the consumers of this religion are what? Female. So I believe that there is an agenda of keeping patriarchy. And the argument has been made, and I don't presume we don't have, I wouldn't say we don't have enough biblical versions that has kept the Bible as other, being as faithful as it is to the origin. I agree. But let us have those that contextualize as well. The question, what do we do with the passages that do harm, is actually almost what I'm going to be talking about on Friday. Yes.